24. It was completely dark inside now. The night was quiet. Ningning had settled into her hideout once more. The lid was half open, propped up by the umbrella. Grandpa could not sleep. He merely drifted in and out of consciousness. He was not floating airily as if being carried by a cloud in the sky, but merely hovering on fog creeping close to the ground. Any sound would bring his feet crashing to earth. The scene downstairs was still very much on his mind. Uncle Huang, Auntie Huang, Dame and Arme, they were still there, covered, but without proper burial. They could not rest in peace, and their spirits would be restless. Yet who could give them a proper burial? He and the Ningning had done what little they could, but it was not enough. The Huangs were gone, just like the Lius before them at the corner store. Grandpa, Ningning's voice interrupted his thought. Yes, I have been thinking of what you said about repentance today. Grandpa mumbled softly. Is that the reason why you chant every day? You mean if I'm repenting for my wrongdoings by chanting every day? Well, Ningning stuttered awkwardly. Yes, he said, that's exactly what I'm doing, repenting for my wrongdoings. But how could you have committed any wrongdoings? You're afraid to step on an ant. But I may have stepped on a few ants without even knowing it. What does that mean? It means that I had done many things before I became a Buddhist, before I became a vegetarian. But they weren't bad things, right? It is still a wrongdoing for me any way you look at it. Oh, Ningning said in a resigned tone. What made you become a Buddhist? Life. Life? There is too much suffering in life. You mean things like the war? He could hear tremors in her voice. Like Auntie Huang and everyone dying? That's right. What else? Ningning persisted. I mean, there had been lots of suffering even before the war started, and even before I was born. Before you were even born? Yes, he sighed. It's a long story. Want to hear it? Came the enthusiastic response. The Jings had been living in Nanking for many, many generations. They could be traced back to at least the reign of the Hongwu Emperor over 600 years ago. Some of the Jings must have been drafted during the Hongwu Emperor's campaign to expand the city walls. Even though the city had experienced periods of prosperity and decline, peace and conflict, it met its worst fate during the uprising started by one man named Hong Xiuquan over 80 years ago. Hong was an ambitious young man who had failed to pass the government examinations several times. You can imagine his frustration. He collapsed and they had to carry him away when he received the news that he had failed yet again. At last, he said he had been called upon by Jehovah to get rid of all the demons in China. You know Jehovah? He asked. I heard Eva mentioning him, said Ningning. Hong had gotten it into his head that he was the son of Jehovah. Ever heard of Jesus? He was Jehovah's son too, which made him Hong's brother. Hong formed secret societies, raised an army, and fought northwards to the Yangtze Valley. They called themselves Heavenly Kingdom of Great Peace. Back then, all the men used to wear their hair in braids. They cut them all off. They captured Nanking in 1853 and renamed it the Heavenly Capital. They tried to reorganize the city, setting up schools and spreading their beliefs. So the emperor had no choice but to stop Hong at any cost. There were a lot of religious Westerners in China. Hong had met some of them and read their books. The Qing government had the support of the foreigners who weren't too fond of Hong and the way he claimed to be Jesus' brother and all. When their joint forces finally broke through the city walls and marched into Nanking, They burned and killed for days and days, and turned the heavenly capital into hell. Worse than what's happening now? Ningning asked. Grandpa's dad had told him it was very bad, but he had not seen it with his own eyes. Back then there were no tanks, planes dropping bombs, or machine guns. The Jin residence was a good-sized compound with a main house and 2 wings enclosing a central courtyard. The family ran a tea house as well as a well-known store in the Temple of the Confucius, which specialized in selling rice paper, writing brushes, ink sticks, and other tools prized for scholars. It had all been burned down. Several of Grandpa's uncles were killed trying to prevent Imperial Army soldiers from looting. Grandpa's own father suffered a broken rib. Great-grandpa, the patriarch of the clan then, couldn't take the strain and died even before the dust had settled and all the dead had been buried. Once Nanking had been retaken, the rest of the clan picked up whatever they could from the ruins and left. All except for Grandpa's father, who ended up staying in Nanking. Is that why we're still here today? Ningning sounded really interested now. My father fell in love with a beautiful girl and decided to stay in Nanking afterward. Where are the rest of the Jin family now? He knew they had wandered off to Fenyang in Anhui province. Some had stayed and took root there. Others had wandered further away, and all contact was lost with them over time. He still remembered seeing his own grandpa once, an elderly man, gray-haired, mustache, soft-spoken. Just like you, Grandpa. Yes, Ningning giggled happily. His Grandpa continued, coughed a lot at night too. Whenever this happened, his father or his mother would get up, pour him a couple of hot water, and pat him on the back until the old man was quiet again. His parents had wanted his grandpa to stay and live with them, but the old man wanted to go back to Fenyang. That was his new home now. He had 3 other sons and more than a dozen grandchildren there. So if I visit Fenyang today, enthused Ningning, I will see lots of relatives there. Yes, you will. Think of that. We should go and visit. Maybe we should. Maybe it's time. Grandpa's birth had caused so much pain to his young mother. It had been a very difficult birth. His mother had been in labor for 2 days, and the pain was killing her. His father was waiting anxiously while his mother was moaning, delirious from the pain and the uncertainty. The frustrated midwife had told his father to go outside, to go somewhere, but he remained. He wanted to hear the first cry of his child, and he wanted to know if his wife would be okay. He just sat outside by the door, waiting. It was on the 3rd night that he heard a baby's wail at last. It was a baby boy. Years later, Grandpa was told that his mother had lost a great deal of blood and was not able to have more babies after that. My birth almost caused my mother to lose her own life. Isn't that a very bad wrongdoing on my part? How could that be your fault? Ningning said. It took you 3 days to be born? You probably didn't want to come to this world because you knew there would be lots of suffering in it. That might be true, Grandpa chuckled, but I don't remember thinking like that when I was being born. Oh, Grandpa,